Dobar dan vam želim i dobrodošlicu na književno predstavljanje našeg Johna Freemana. Ja to tako uvijek punog srca kažem našeg iz razloga što nam njegova podrška beskrajno znači i jako smo sretni i sretne zbog toga što je John Freeman i drugi put na Bookstanu. I zapravo je ovaj festival nekako nastao zahvaljujući bosansko-hercegovačko-američkom prijateljstvu. Najprije zbog našeg Aleksandra Saše Hemona koji živi u Americi i koji je kurator prvog Bookstana, zahvaljujući čemu smo upoznali jednog od najznačajnijih američkih književnih kritičara, urednika i autora Johna Freemana, koji nam je nekako svojim kredibilitetom i socijalnim kapitalom omogućio niz važnih kontakata. U Sarajevo ovaj put John Freeman, nakon što je prošle godine bio glavni moderator, dolazi i u svojstvu gosta i domaćina, zapravo autora koji predstavlja svoju novu zbirku pod nazivom Mape i koja je, što nam je opet jako važno, djelimično i nastala prošle godine u Sarajevu. John Freeman, uprkos našim željama da bude ovdje, sigurno ne bi mogao biti i ne bi bilo ove zbirke da nije bilo podrške Američke ambasade u Bosni i Hercegovini, na čemu im se mnogo zahvaljujemo. Johna Freemana će predstaviti bosansko-hercegovačka književnica Adisa Bašić. Jučer sam spomenula koliko su mi intimno važne ove zamjene uloga i te pozicije koje nisu fiksne i zapravo i naši autori i autorice i moderatori i moderatorice imaju prekršt obaveze i sreće pa su to disciplinirani ljudi pa se ujutru kad se probude i pitaju šta danas radim, da li predstavljam sebe ili nekoga drugog. Jučer smo danas započeli sa književnom promocijom nove knjige Adise Bašić, a potom je navečer John Freeman bio domaćin našem gostu Hanifu Kurešiju. Prošle godine na Bookstanu se desila jedna fina saradnja između Adise i Freemana, kada je Freeman objavio jednu od njenih sjajnih pjesama i zapravo festival i kroz to pokazuje koliko je važan i koliko je ta komunikacija između autora, urednika, kritičara, izdavača iz cijelog svijeta nužna i koliko upravo ovakva okupljanja tome mogu doprinijeti. Još jednom ponavljam da nije bilo podrške niza naših prijatelja, među njima i Američke ambasade u Bosni i Hercegovini, sve je bilo teško realizovati. Zato ću zamoliti. Stalno vježbam, kako se kaže u ženskom rodu, atašej za kulturu, može li atašejcu za kulturu u ambasadi Sjedinjenih Američkih Država u Bosni i Hercegovini, gospođu Elizabeti Blumenthal, da vam se obrati.
Hvala. To je promocija za mene jer ja sam zamjenica atašeja za kulturu, da budem iskrena. Dobro, puno hvala što ste došli. Jako nam je drago da možemo podržati ovaj odličan event Bookstan Festival književnosti, posebno budući da ima tako poznat gost iz Amerika, John Freeman. Neću puno govoriti, samo da kažem hvala što ste došli i uživajte.
Hvala vam još jednom. Kada se na Bookstanu neke stvari izgovore na glas, onda to univerzum čuje. Ja ne sumnjam da će i na pozornici biti izgovorene neke sjajne riječi, stihovi i rečenice i zapravo mislim da je ovo idealna kombinacija jer malo je tako ozbiljnih i posvećenih ljudi kao što su John Freeman i Adisa Bašić uživo.
Samo ljepši način da kažeš malo je ovakvih štrebera. Dobar dan, hvala vam što ste tu. Ja ću najprije kratko predstaviti našeg gosta, a onda ćemo zajedno čitati njegovu poeziju. John i ja smo se dogovorili da odustanemo od uobičajene kolonijalne navade da svi govorimo na engleskom, tako da danas imamo malo kombinaciju bosansko-engleske. John Freeman je američki pjesnik, urednik i književni kritičar koji je objavljivao tekstove u većini najrelevantnijih glasila engleskog govornog područja. Na Bookstanu je u dvostrukoj ulozi, kao što smo čuli, domaćina i gosta, još od lani, kada je sa Aleksandrom Hemonom učestvovao zapravo u pokretanju ovog festivala. Večeras imamo posebno zadovoljstvo da premijerno promovišemo njegovu prvu zbirku pjesama Mape, koju je Bajbuk objavio prije nekoliko dana u prevodu Irene Žlof. Većina ovih pjesama ranije je objavljivana u eminentnim književnim časopisima, kao što su Paris Review, New Yorker i Harvard Review, ali sada se prvi put pojavljuju kao knjiga. Zanimljivo je da bosansko izdanje prethodi engleskom koje će biti objavljeno ove jeseni. Freemanove pjesme su ukotvljene u najrazličitijim mjestima, od američkog gradića Rocklina, koji tek niče pred očima dokonih tinejdžera, do gradova krcatih historijom kakvi su Bejrut, Rim ili Sarajevo. Njegovi lirski junaci su emigranti prve, druge i treće generacije ili žive u stanju trajnog čekanja da se krene naput. Oni su frustrirani provincijalci kojima je turiranje motora jedini dostupni odušak, ali su i užurbani stanovnici njujorškog megapolisa u kojem neprekidno pulsira život. U Freemanovim pjesmama se, kao i u njegovom Njujorku, sudaraju ljepota i trivijalnost, jutarnje isporuke raskošnih cvjetnih aranžmana i nečije neometano pišanje na parkingu. On svijet vidi kao kompleksno mjesto na kojem istovremeno postoje oprečne stvarnosti. Jedna je militantna, nasilna, opasna, puna razornih raketa i bombi, a druga je blaga i životna. U njoj djevojčica iz istočnog Sakramenta vozi svoj ulašteni bicikl. Njegove pjesme govore i o sirotinji i o oligarsima, o obespravljenima i o privilegovanima. Njegove teme su sa jedne strane opšte društvene, historijske, a sa druge strane potpuno intimističke. Ljubav, porodica, gubitak bliske osobe. Nešto kasnije će nam John čitati pjesme iz svoje knjige, a ja ću čitati bosanske prevode. Prije pomenute zbirke pjesama, Freeman je objavio dvije publicističke knjige, Tiranija e-maila i Kako čitati romanopisca. Tiranija e-maila prati istorijat dopisivanja dug 4000 godina, od glinenih pločica do današnjih dana. Freeman u knjizi piše o tome kako je elektronska pošta promijenila način na koji komuniciramo, ali i način na koji razmišljamo i doživljavamo svijet. Knjiga Kako čitati romanopisca je serija od 55 razgovora o književnosti koje je naš današnji gost vodio sa nekim od najznačajnijih savremenih pisaca kao što su John Updike, Toni Morrison, Günter Grass, Jonathan Franzen ili Haruki Murakami. John Freeman godinama piše književnu kritiku i broj knjiga koje je prikazao mjeri se stotinama, ako ne i hiljadama. Uređuje književni časopis Freemans, koji ovdje vidimo, i online književni časopis Literary Hub, a kreativno pisanje predaje na New York University. Njegovu karijeru su u najvećoj mjeri obilježili književni časopisi, a ta ljubav traje i danas. Njegova druga sklonost, osim književnih časopisa, koja je za Ameriku pomalo neobična, i o tome ćemo pričati kasnije, to je strana književnost. On prelazi granice, otkriva autore i u dobrom dijelu svijeta se osjeća kao kod kuće. O tome i o mnogo čemu drugom ćemo razgovarati u nastavku, a sad ćemo pročitati nekoliko njegovih pjesama. Here comes the battle image.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Is this on? No. Dobro? Yeah, all right, that was my favorite. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Adisa. We neglected to mention at the very end of that is one of the other side effects of coming to Sarajevo was I was able to meet her and to read her poems and to realize that they had been translated. And there's one in the current issue of Freeman's On Home, a poem that you probably know well, but it was new to us in English. So thank you for that. I think every poet in the world growing up thinks that it would be the greatest thing in the world if they could just go to a bar and talk to beautiful people, and the end result is they get their book published. But that's sort of what happened here. So I cannot say thank you enough to Bible for making this book possible. So I'll just read a poem, and Adisa will read it in Bosnian. The first poem I'm going to read, for 5 or 6 years I worked for a billionaire, which required a kind of mental gymnastics, in that I had to pretend as if money meant the same thing to both of us in order to be a good employee. But at one point, she told me a story which so surprised me that it sort of set me off on thinking about something. And I was living in London, and she had given her husband for his 50th birthday a pristine 1969 Bentley convertible. And he never drove it. He just parked it in the garage. 10 years later, he sold it at a profit. And it made me think of London. We talked of it last night with Hannah Qureshi. Beautiful, wonderful, multi-ethnic, vibrant city, but it's also a city of staggering inequalities. And if you think of how much a car like that, how many people it could feed, I started to think of all the other riches that were piling up in places. So I wrote this poem called The Bomb Shelters of the Oligarchs. 500 feet below the park, tunnels stretch for miles. Blast-proof titanium corridors lit by low-voltage Bruck pendants. Mario, the guardsman, crawled to freedom to escape Czechoslovakia. 10 years he's put on a blue Karaseni suit and plunged into the Earth's inner hush, cutting a motion-censored wedge of light into the vault's violet dark. He's never had a visitor, unless you count the butcher who weekly stocks the Kobe steaks, the sommelier who tests the humidity of the cellar, the mechanic who runs the 1969 Bentley never driven for 6 minutes each day, and the veterinarian who feeds the Bornean elephant 700 pounds of cabbage, acacia leaves, and carrots dropped into its cell by a dumbwaiter secreted into Holland Park's waiting pool. Twice an hour, Mario passes the first edition library, the room of jewels, the warehouse of art as big and cool as St. Paul's Cathedral, the hidden harem, TV turned up high, reality programs in Russian. Midday, he kneels on the settee by his post and unwraps a butter sandwich and chews slowly, drawing out the time before he must adjust his blink rate and return to his post and wait for the call, the one that never comes.
But admit you made up this elephant.
Oh, I met the elephant.
Podzemna skloništa oligarha. 200-tinjak metara od parka tuneli se pružaju kilometrima. Taniumske hodnike otporne na eksplozije osvjetljavaju niskonaponski žuk reflektora. Mario stražar puzao je do slobode bježeći iz Tisove Slovačke. 10 godina on oblači plavo Karačenjevo odijelo i otiskuje se u unutarnji mir zemlje, presjecajući senzorima izrešetanu frišku svjetla na ulazu u ljubčastu tamu sebe. Nikad me niko nije posjetio, osim ako računaš mesara koji sedmično donosi svježe kobije odreske, someljea koji provjerava vlažnost podruma, automehaničara koji održava Bentley iz 69. nevoženo po 6 minuta svaki dan i veterinara koji hrani bornejskog slona s 300 kila kupusa, listova akacije i mrkve, spuštajući ih u ćeliju malim teretnim liftom s isputom u jezerce u Holland Parku. Svakih pola sata Mario prođe pored biblioteke prvih izdanja, sobe s draguljima, skladišta umjetnina, velikog i hladnog kao katedrala Svetog Pavla, taj skriveni harem. TV je pojačan do kraja, reality emisija na ruskom. U podne on sjedne na dvosjed pored svog stražarskog mjesta i razmota sendvič s puterom i žvači ga polako. Odgađajući trenutak kad će morati opet prilagoditi brzinu treptanja i vratiti se na radno mjesto i čekati poziv onaj koji nikad ne dođe.
So I share my life with a woman who left Beirut during the Civil War, and whenever I go home with her to London or we go to Beirut, eventually we stay up late enough and I just listen to them tell stories. And I've heard a lot of different stories about their departure from Beirut because there were two. Her dad went back to get the family dog and explained to a soldier who put a gun in his mouth that he was getting the dog. And there was just a series of stories, but one of the ones that stuck with me the most was sort of the strangest in that they drove out of Beirut and they were going through Syria and they had to do something to prevent their car from being stolen, which is the subject of this poem. It's called The Boy Under the Car. That night in Damascus, her job was to put tea and cake, a sprig of mint, on a silver tray, and walk down the crushed pebble drive to the boy paid to sleep under the car. She never said his name, or what he looked like, or whether, when she came upon him, curled up, eyes black and glossy, she caught him singing to himself before the clattering metal made him silent.
Dječak pod autom. Te noći u Damasku njen je posao bio da stavi čaj i kolač i grančicu mente na srebrni pladanj i to odnese pošljunčanim putem dječaku plaćeno da spava pod autom. Nikad nije rekla njegovo ime, ni kako je izgledao i da li ga je, kad je došla do njega sklupčano, očiju crnih i sjajnih, uhvatila kako si pjeva prije nego ga je zveckanje metala ušutkalo.
So, like a lot of young people, I started to write poems to go on dates. It didn't work out so well, so I stopped writing poems and did other things and eventually found my way. So I was a late bloomer. We were talking yesterday, and she's like, "Why are you so old and publishing your first book of poems?"
Actually, it is.
But it's because I started late, and I was writing other literary criticism and other things, and I think for a long time, like a lot of people, I was just afraid that what I was thinking wouldn't come out right, and then like a lot of people, I just had a series of losses, basically, that forced me to write poems, because if I didn't do something with what had happened, it would kind of destroy me. And I think sometimes literature can do that. It can give you a form to control or to understand something that's hard or impossible to understand. Maybe even just to try to understand it. So originally this book was mostly a book about grief. And then I felt a little bit like I was burlesquing, you know that word? I was burlesquing my grief. And a poet friend of mine once said unkindly about another poet, he said, "Oh, she's dragging her dead mother's body all over town." And I thought, I do not want to write that book. So I wrote this poem instead to stop myself from writing only about grief, because there's greater griefs. It's called Repeat. I tell it so many times on 10th Street, over lunch, in a bar to tender eyes. It begins to sound like a piece of news. But once I decide I'll tell it how it happened, how she starved to death, mumbled through her pain, clung, shat, moaned, how I was too frightened to sit with her through the night so she wouldn't die alone.
Ponavljanje. Toliko puta sam to ispričao na 10. ulici, na ručku, u baru, nasuprot suosjećajnim pogledima, da mi počinje zvučati kao vijest. Ali jedanput odlučim, ispričat ću kako je bilo. Kako je umrla od gladi, mumljala svoju bol, stiskala, srala, ječala. kako sam bio previše uplašen da sjedim s njom u noći da ne bi umrla sama.
So the other thing in here is as Adisa mentioned in the introduction, was love and heartbreak. So I was very helpfully dumped by one of my ex-wife in the course of beginning to write poems, and I thought, this is so useful, now I have something to write about. I was really grateful to her for that, although I didn't see it at the time that way. And like every time you have a breakup, for some reason, just at the moment that you've moved on with your life and you're happy and you peel oranges without crying, and you get this email out of the blue that's like, do you know where I exist and I destroyed you? So this is a poem kind of about that. It's called Tautology. She sends me a photograph from a small Denver cemetery, shot by camera phone. I wonder if that's her shadow behind the headstone, bearing our names. I wonder too if the crunched leaves scattered there made her briefly nostalgic or thoughtful before she snapped and swiped the forward button, remarking, "Look, John, we're dead."
Tautologija. Šaljem fotografiju s malog denverskog groblja uslikanu kamerom telefona. Pitam se, je li njena ta duga sjenka iza nadgrobnog spomenika s našim imenima? Pitam se također, je li uzgaženo lišće rasuto okolo učinilo nakratko nostalgičnom ili zamišljenom, prije nego je uslikala i prevukla prst preko dugmeta za proslijediti s komentarom, vidi John, mrtvi smo.
It's a really cheerful book, I promise. So throughout the writing of this book, I was living in London, and at night the buses, they run very late and they're very red, and the buses are all lit up like aquariums. And so if you're walking somewhere thoughtfully, a bus, you hear it from a long ways away, and then suddenly this thing is there, it's like a spaceship. And at night in London, it can also get kind of soupy a little bit. It's not foggy, there is no fog anymore. But anyway, this bus startled me one night, so I wrote this. It's called Night Bus to Richmond. Suddenly it's upon me, scything the night like a red knife. 3 passengers, specimens in the vinegar glow. On the upper deck, a woman is reading Catch-22. The dream having erased the cold rubber mats, the diesel rattle. A gray December night, a man walks up a hill toward home.
Noćni autobus za Richmond. Odjednom osvane predamnom, parajući noć kao crven nož. 3 putnika, primjerci u sirčetnom odsjaju. Na gornjoj platformi žena čita kvaku 22. San je izbrisao hladne gumene podove, dizelaško brundanje, sivu decembarsku noć. Čovjek hoda uzbrdo prema kući.
So one of the best sort of melancholy killers for me, obviously it's not writing poetry, but is spending time with a dog. And I sometimes think I'll write an existential book called Live Like a Dog, because I spent a lot of time with my girlfriend's mother's Irish setter, and she had lupus, agoraphobia, a skin disorder, arthritis, seizures. She was on 7 or 8 pills a day, and she was so happy. And every day there was the possibility of something good happening, and she didn't overthink time. You know, every 2 hours was an excellent 2 hours. There was no dread. She didn't get the Sundays. So one day I realized that I had just been studying her, and I wrote this called, her name was Maddie. She died recently. But there's a new dog, and it's really and it's called, but this is for Maddie. Then a swift left turn. Her nose tilts to the breeze, feathering her hair, eyes closed in pleasure, or curiosity, or rapture. I don't know. So much of what she does remains a mystery to me, as I'm sure we remain to her. And she stands there, pointing to a new day, as she has 4,000 times before, no diminishment or boredom, as if this were the first breeze she ever smelled, filled with magic and dogweed and bus fuel and box prep and burglars, last night's laundry entering the spin cycle. And she stands there, poised in arthritic grandeur, 7 years into her overbred, illness-plagued, brief life, showing us hope is routine is hope.
I ja imam cud. Medi. Slijedi nagli lijevi zaokret. Njena njuška se nagne prema povjetarcu koji joj prebire dlaku, oči sklopljene od užitka ili radoznalosti ili zanosa ne zna. Toliko toga što ona radi ostaje misterija, kao što smo sigurno i mi njoj. I stoji tu, pokazujući na novi dan, kao i 4000 puta ranije. Nema zamora niti dosade, kao da je ovo prvi povjetarac koji je ikada onjušila, ispunjen magijom i žutim tratinčicama i ispusnim plinovima i lisičijim izmetom i provalnicima i sinoćnim vešom koji počinje zadnju centrifugu. A ona stoji tu, držanja artritičnog grandioznog, 7. godinu svog bolešću poharanog kratkog života, pokazujući nam da nada je rutina, je nada.
So I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time clobbered by the awareness that my life could have been a different life. You know, so I walk around and just I'm amazed that I'm not a dog. I wasn't born in Sarajevo, or I wasn't the boy who paid to sleep under the car. And I think one of the things I try to stop doing, although it's really hard, is wishing I was somewhere else. You know, I think all of us have struggled with that. You think my life, if I was here, would be better, or if I was there, I'd be better, or if I was someone else, I would be better. And after living away from home for a while, I came home and I realized that all the beautiful things were there all along. And I'll just describe it. It's called 28th Street. All the years we lived behind the florists, when I used to wake early to stand by the window and watch the men in red sweatshirts pushing dollies of hydrangeas, tulips on pallets from Holland, pale pink ranunculus, crowds of yellow hyacinths, a fury of color before halogen lamps all before the hour of 6. The restaurant owners in black leather jackets who came before dawn were made to stand like courtiers before this beauty, to await its assembly, while across the street, someone was usually pissing with leisure in the car park.
28. ulica. Svih godina, dok smo živjeli za cvjećarnice, kad bih se budio rano da stojim kraj prozora i gledam muškarce u crvenim trenerkama kako guraju kolica hortenzija, tulipana na paletama iz Holandije, blijedo ružičastih kukurijeka, gomile žutih zumbula, eksploziju boja pod halogenskim svjetiljkama, sve prije sata 6. Vlasnici restorana u crnim kožnim jaknama, tu još od prije zore, prisiljeni stajati kao dvorjani pred ovom ljepotom, čekajući svoje aranžmane, dok preko puta neko obično piša nepometeno na parkingu.
So I had such a good time here last summer, but one of the best parts was getting to know people and listening to the stories and having them talk to me. And towards the end of the week, someone I became friends with, we were standing outside Bookstan, and people were drinking wine. And the kind of dream of summer was unfurling around us. And she told me a story that suddenly recalibrated the reality, or layered it, as I'm sure you feel it here all the time. It's called Sarajevo Summer 2016. She pointed 200 meters there. I was 15. We were drinking wine outside a bookshop. The shelling lasted all night. The ruby-colored sunset, the river close. The theater so crowded, people sat in one another's laps. Bombs fell so near every few minutes, parts of the stage splintered. I'm leaning on a car, cool metal smoke glass. The actors, she tells me, didn't flinch. They didn't miss a single line. And the audience didn't move, didn't make a sound. You're here, you survived, and you're there, floor shaking, streets buckle, watching a play that for eternity will last.
Sarajevo, ljeto 2016. Pokazuje rukom 200 metara dalje. Tamo. Imala sam 15 godina. Pijemo vino ispred knjižare. Granatiranje je trajalo cijelu noć. Purpurni zalazak sunca, rijeka u blizini. Pozorište tako krcato, ljudi jedni drugim sjede u krilu. Granate tako blizu, svakih nekoliko minuta frcaju komadi scene. Stojim naslonjen na auto, hladni metal, zatamljena stakla. Glumci, kaže mi, nisu ni trepnuli, nisu pogriješili ni jednu riječ. Publika ne mrda, ne oglašava se. Ovdje si, preživjela si i tamo si, sjediš u tišini, tlo podrhtava, ulice se povijaju, gledaš predstavu koja će vječno trajati. Hvala Ireni Žlov koja nam se pridružila malo prije, koja je autorica ovih prevoda, pa evo sad imala priliku da ih čuje ovako, kad su...
Sročitani kako treba.
Dobro, kad smo im malo udahnuli života i ovog javnog nastupa. Poezija voli govorenje, poeziji treba da se govori naglas. Cijeli je set tema o kojima bih ja voljela da govorim sa Johnom. Iako živimo na dva kraja svijeta, dva drastično različita života, neki segmenti naših biografija se na čudne načine dodiruju i tu onda ima mjesta na kojima bih ja bila posebno radoznala. Ali ovo što je malo prije spomenuo da je late bloomer, ja sam to rekla nekako pristojnije, otkud baš da je ovo tek prva knjiga, a toliko si već pisao ranije, da je prva knjiga poezije. I on je rekao da je ta knjiga nastajala sporo. I meni je to strašno neobično, da se išta danas dešava sporo. I to me podsjetilo na dvije stvari koje nekako znam od ranije. Jedno je jedna pjesma u kojoj Tadeusz Ružević, poljski pjesnik, kaže: danas pisci pišu tako brzo kao da žele neku rupu začepiti papirom. A druga je malo starija, od Horacija, rimskog pjesnika, prije nekih 2000 godina, nevjerovatno svježa stvar. On kaže, kad nešto u svojoj poetici, kaže, kad nešto napišeš, trebalo bi sačekati jedno 7 godina da vidiš valja to. Onda ono sve što ne valja zapališ i ako slučajno nešto preživi, onda to pokažeš ljudima. Meni se čini da je tebi Horacije malo bliži. Otkud ova sporost u ovom brzom vremenu?
I think it's there's certain things that are just more fun to do slowly to begin with. Like you don't play a record twice as fast and you enjoy it just as much. And I think you don't go for a walk with a friend. You don't speed walk unless you're exercising together. And I think of poems to some degree as taking a walk with yourself. And it took me a long time to understand what was in my mind and what I was seeing. I'm trying to write about the development of an ethical consciousness that is made up of loving and witnessing and being in the world. And you know, in my introductions, I jokingly describe, oh, I saw this and I wrote a poem, and it often, those two incidents were often separated by a year or more. You know, and so in many ways, I think to me, poetry can be the most thoughtful genre, because it doesn't necessarily have to have a narrative to some degree, like a novel. It doesn't have to have any facts. I made up the elephant and everything else in that poem except for the Bentley. So I just felt grateful that it was like some mysterious thing came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you can start now. And I did, and one thing I should mention is I would not have written this book without, because I became friends with a much older poet. He's 70 now. He's published 7 books. Fabulous cafe living, law teaching, very angry, hilarious, long-talking Lebanese guy who, the longer we talk, the closer he gets to the table. And he's always sort of, you know, just muscling out the ideas of what he's saying. And we became friends, and he would read my poems after I wrote them. And so, you know, this is a very small book, but it's sitting on a big pile of shit. So there's just a lot of other poems that were thrown out to make a book. And I'm sure you know this, that you write 10 and there's like one image that stands.
Yeah, of course. Međutim, meni je interesantna i ta pozicija da sebe sad puštaš, da sazrijevaš kao pjesnik, nakon što si već itekako etabliran kao kritičar. Mene zanima, jesu li u ljubavi, kako žive ta dva Johna. I da li su to dva različita pogleda na svijet, ili pogleda na književnost, kritičara i autora pjesnika?
No, I think they're combined by wonder. I think if you read with no sense of wonder, then you're an assassin. And there are critics that function that way, and you know, everyone loves it. They love a little blood on the newspaper. But the other thing that, aside from, you know, death in the family and the friendship with a poet, that got me writing poetry again was reviewing it and reading it closely. And what's beautiful about reviewing poetry is you can read the book several times. And it also, as a reviewer, there's no plot to summarize, there's no reputation to work around. It's pure writing about language. And in doing that, I had to shape reviews. I realized that we're beginning to, and by using the language of the poet, was in some not so degraded way, making a poem as well. So the poetry I've read has deeply made me a poet. It was the admiration of those poems that made me want to write poems I hoped that would not betray my appreciation for poetry. And you know, I reread the people I love all the time. It's something you can do. If you love Moby Dick, you reread it maybe once. But you can read you know, Emily Dickinson or Jack Gilbert every day.
Ova prisutnost neprekidna u javnosti te na neki poseban način izlaže kritici. Da li misliš da će tvoja zbirka poezije, sad kad izađe, biti pomalo i predmet osvete? jer ipak iza sebe imaš godine prikazivanja tuđih knjiga.
I have to wait for the green light to go on. I don't know. To be honest, I haven't thought much about it. I try. It's bizarre for someone sitting on stage to say this, but I try to proceed in the world as if I have no face. You know, that I'm just sort of a floating eye, and I like to not think about myself and my identity and just my meanness. You know, because I think of them as mostly useless handles to everyday life. And so I suspect, you know, if I thought more about it, that there might be some angry poet out there sharpening his knife and just, oh, I can't wait to get Freeman. But I hope I didn't write the kind of reviews, you know, that would provoke that. And I also, happily, in America, there is poetry world. I mean, there are hundreds of universities, and there are probably well over 1,000 journals, and there's lots and lots of miniature grants, and there's festivals, and there's people with poetry voice, which, if I were to read something in poetry voice, it would sound like this. Stingrays, black as bats, birds sparked open, flashing piston heads, Lincolns with suicide doors. So just that's a whole scene, and I'm not in it because I've been in an editor seat or a nonfiction seat. So I think if anything, people might, you know, from that, I could imagine they might think I'm a dilettante. But I just want to write the things I'm interested in, and hopefully just ignore worrying about stuff.
I envy you. It's really rare. Stvarno je rijetko sresti osobu koja je ovoliko oduševljen čitalac. I John to zaista jeste. A nekako, ja mislim da svaki dobar i pisac i kritičar u prvom redu treba da bude entuzijastičan čitalac. I nažalost, u stvarnosti to ne viđamo tako često kao što bismo trebali. I nekako John ima to zarazno oduševljenje za književnost koja mu se dopada, odnosno koja mu nešto govori, koja mu nekako objašnjava svijet. Ta urednička pozicija je mjesto koje te vjerovatno obilježilo, jer to traje godinama, urednik si različitih književnih časopisa. Možeš li mi malo opisati taj proces traganja za dobrim tekstom i traganja za autorima koji možda još nisu afirmisani i poznati? Jer objavljivao si sviju, od Nobelovaca do nekih mladih autora koji se tek probijaju. Kako izgleda taj proces traganja za tekstom za koji znaš ovo će se naći u mom časopisu?
It doesn't take that long. I'm not actually thinking.
It's just a trick. You want to come up with an answer, so it's like...
I once interviewed Haruki Murakami on stage. It was in Auckland, New Zealand. They sold tickets on a Friday at 5 o'clock, and by 8 p.m. that night, they had sold 2,500 tickets. So it was this huge auditorium, and a friend of mine edits the fiction section of the New Yorker, and she has interviewed him on stage, and I said, so, can you have any tips? And she said, just wait for his answers, because he's translating in his head. And so imagine a room 25 times this, utterly silent, when I would ask a question like, your house is burning down, you have a record collection, which one do you go into? Which do you pick out? And I was like, and he'd be silent for 35 seconds. I'd think, oh, this is really challenging my Quaker weight for the inner light to surface. So I'm not making him do that. But the search for text is pretty simple to me in the sense that it's a lot like travel if you're a traveler. or walking if you're a walker and you wander, you know, and you kind of, if you're a wanderer, you spend a lot of time, like I went for a walk today, and I, for a good 20 minutes, was walking in a stretch that no one was walking for pleasurable reasons. Like they were walking to a destination. And I realized that, but I was just kind of like, if you walk long enough, you kind of go into a trance and your mind shifts and you end up seeing things that you aren't looking for. And I think searching for texts is a tiny bit like that, and that I don't know what I'm looking for. I just know I'm looking for a new texture, a new sound, and something, you know, that's surprising, that jumps out from the sea of other stimuli around it. Those stimuli being other submissions or voices or books I'm reading. And so it's really kind of just being patient, waiting for something to assert itself out of the noise. And basically things come to me through 4 or 5 channels. One, agents, literary agents, submit them. So I'm getting a constant stream of things from that. The second is random people find me on Twitter or Facebook or get my email from a friend and send it in. The third is a friend or a college professor who has students who study writing. And the best of them do this. They say, I have a student who's really had a breakthrough. Could you look at this? Then I'm, you know, at a festival or something like this, and I hear a name that's repeated, you know, like a phrase, like here, Dobra. Like sometimes you're at a festival and you hear a word that often, and it's someone's name. You think, all right, I gotta find out what this Mr. Dobra is like. And this is Dobra. And I guess the last one is just my own curiosity as a reader or luck. I review books still primarily just for the hope of finding something good. I think that's how a reviewer should act. You don't go into a bookstore and go, ooh, I'm gonna find something I hate here. You know? So that's my approach as a reviewer. And when I find something I like, I think, you know, sometimes it's the kind of writer you think they have something else to write. So, for example, one piece I published by a writer was when I worked at Francia in London. This American novelist, Richard Russo, he's written 7 or 8 novels set in dying industrial towns with absent fathers, alcoholic policemen, fall down on their luck, handymen. They're comic and sad, but they're also a pretty damning picture of, I guess to some degree, what's happened to working class life in America. And his love of that place is inseparable from his anger. And I think that's often a misconception about the American dream. You know, when people write about it, they think the American dream is the achievement of the American dream. And I think the best, or the most complicated novels are the novels in which the American dream is the hope for something that maybe is not there. Anyway, I thought he's written 7 novels about this town that he grew up in, but he's never written about the town. And because I reviewed his books, I thought the pattern was there to me because I had to read all of them.
Možda ja griješim i možda nekako nemam tako dobro razumijevanje i poznavanje američkog izdavaštva i nekakve kulturne klime, ali meni se čini da je vrlo neobično ovaj tvoj interes za stranu književnost i za strane pisce. Kad si uređivao časopis Granta koji si malo prije spomenuo u Londonu, nekoliko izdanja je bilo posvećeno, cijeli niz izdanja, stranim književnostima, kineskoj, norveškoj, bugarskoj. Otkud ovaj tvoj interes za stranu književnost? I da li je to u Americi možda uobičajenije nego što sam ja svjesna? Meni se čini nekako...
No, it's okay.
Well, the simplest answer is my mother. She read the Gulag Archipelago when she was pregnant, which tells you how long she was pregnant for. I have two brothers, and we're all separated by, 1 year, basically. So she was busy, so I grew up in a house with a small library, and half the books were in translation. So to me, having like novels by people that were from somewhere else made sense. And then, to some degree, it's from my own reading. So, for example, like every teenage boy, I fell in love with Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, and I didn't have a beret or a bongo drum, but I did write some bad poetry and want to travel the United States. But if you read those writers closely, William Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, Ginsberg, they're always name-checking other writers, and many of them, Hamsun, the Norwegian novelist, or William Burroughs really liked Celine, the French novelist. And so if you peel any thread, I think, in any literary culture, you might very quickly get outside of that culture. And so even though from the outside, I think the U.S. looks very nationalistic, all my experience as a reader of its literature and as a person who's been lucky to meet some of the writers has shown me that it's intimately connected with global literature. Here's another story. I once went to Istanbul and spent a few days following around Kurdish novelist Yasir Kemal, and it was great. It was like being the Tony Soprano. Every time he walked into a restaurant, the waiter would sweep in with the biggest fish, and they would seat him down, and there would be one guy over his shoulder with the pepper, and another guy pouring some wine, another guy putting the olive oil out, and then he would sit and tell stories. And I didn't know this, but James Baldwin, again, quintessentially American writer, spent a lot of time in Turkey, and he was telling stories about James Baldwin. He was telling stories about a pen conference, I think it was in Vienna, at which he became friends with Arthur Miller. And so I realized that some of I once saw, an Arthur Miller play with Liam Neeson. What's the play about, you would know it, the Salem Witch Trials?
The Crucible.
The Crucible, yeah. And Liam Neeson's great, and I sat there as a 23-year-old at a Broadway thing, and I thought, this is the most American thing ever, even then. And then I realized someone like Arthur Miller is deeply connected to the outside world. I think the changes that in publishing, there is a kind of mind block about literature and translation that is backed up by sales records of authors who are translated. But I think literary journals, the sales are so relatively low. What's the risk, really? I think it's to me the purpose of a literary journal is to create a culture in which writers can do interesting things and to introduce new writers to the people that are willing to participate in that culture. And so I think there are a lot of readers who are curious, who want to read writers from around the world, and some of them happen to live in America.
Is that why you prefer literary journals? Because there is no commercial pressure?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, I think reading is such a social activity. And it's not, I'm not talking about book clubs per se. I'm talking about if you read a book, you ultimately end up telling someone else about it. It operates inside you. It's like a psychotropic drug. It affects your moods, the way you think, the things you say, and that ultimately, in some ways, can, end up introducing you to other people. And so, but a literary journal is 20 times that. It's not just one writer. It's not you sitting alone reading a novel by, I don't know, Dan Brown or whomever. It's you with 20 people at once. And the juxtaposition of voices, I think, is very interesting. And ultimately, because literary journals have to have, I think, public events and public culture around it becomes an even more social enterprise than, say, editing and publishing one book at a time by writers.
Well, what is average circulation of one literary journal?
In the U.S., it's 1,200 copies, roughly. And there's a literary journal called N+1, 1,200 copies. There's a literary journal called Brick in Canada, very, very beautiful journal, kind of oversized. There's lots of beautiful writers, 1,200 copies. This, I don't know why, it might be the mixture of names in it, but this, I think the first one, the print run, was around 10,000. So a little bit more than half of that, and it's still selling. And then there's 2,000 in Australia, 2,000 selling in England. So it's about all total 15,000. But it's a different kind of literary journal in that, like Granta and a few others, it has a theme for every issue. So there's a kind of handle to it. It's not a suitcase, you have to kind of wrap in cellophane and stuck in the hold of the plane. And it's not just about writing. The primary impulse of this literary journal is storytelling. Because I want people to write for it that are telling stories, the kinds that you are listened to at a dinner party or when it's quiet at night and just a few people are awake and someone suddenly makes it go even quieter. And because I think the sound of a voice telling a story is very compelling, and I think it's one of the ways that we understand the hardest things.
I love the way how old-fashioned you are concerned with literature. And that's how I believe it should be. Govoreći o pritiscima I komercijalnim pritiscima I imajući na umu kako je američko tržište ogromno I kako tamo dobra recenzija znači veliku prodaju, da li si nekad osjetio neku vrstu pritiska na sebe, da li su te pokušavali podmititi nečim lijepim ili te zastrašiti? Ili sam ja previše gangsterskih filmova gledala?
No, my girlfriend is a literary agent, and when it was clear that we were on a date and not just a friendly outing that happened to involve kissing, she went to her files and looked through all the review files of all of her clients to see if I reviewed any of them badly. So I've only experienced the reverse pressure, which is if you have reviewed me badly, you no more kissing. So there are, U.S. publishers have a bigger budget than other places, so there are forms of minor control and bribery, such as lunches at expensive restaurants. So every now and then I would go to those, and I would leave feeling a little unclean, because I would, you would go to this lunch, and it's probably a $200 lunch with wine and, other people like you there, and you all have that slightly guilty look that you're all watching each other take a bribe. But almost every other person there, usually, in my case, was a staff editor at a newspaper or a magazine. And whereas I was always a sort of lone wolf, like a freelancer. So I stopped going to those because every now and then I would pick up the book, in the pile of books of what I could review, and I remember thinking this, like, oh, I went to that lunch, but I don't really like the book. What to do? And so I stopped going because we were talking about how you find the things you put in a literary journal. I never went to a lunch and came away thinking, I have to review this book. If anything, the lunch to me now is a bad sign. The only lunch I'm glad I went to was Norman Mailer, towards the end of his life, published this book that was a combination, very Mailer-like, of all the other books of Norman Mailer. So it was like the condensed Mailer. And they had a lunch for him at a steakhouse in New York, old-time steakhouse, you know, big, thick, juicy steaks and pictures of boxers on the wall, and this guy from the 15th century who still happens to be alive named Norman Mailer there, slicing through his bloody meat, telling the stories. And as much as there are some offensive things about Mailer, stabbing his wife, for example, you know, he did do some amazing things, and his engagement with political culture in the United States and civil rights and human rights was legitimate and profound. And to see someone like that alive, telling the stories was worth it. And there was no backup pressure too from the publisher to say, like, you know, make it Norman Mailer Day, whatever, because they kind of knew that this was almost like a thank you to people who had reviewed him over his lifetime.
Ja imam još jedno ili dva pitanja. Ako neko iz publike želi da se priključi, sad je možda pravi trenutak za to. Izvolite.
I was wondering about a quotation by Malcolm Mann, who once said that everything comes down to aesthetics and political economy. So I was wondering, where does your magazine fall in between those two? Because literature in translation is a political act in any way. Publishing literature is a political act as is reading. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on your magazine?
I guess the slightly longer answer to what Adisa asked about publishing literature and translation is, I think one of the fundamental and persistent causes of violence is the assumption that one life is worth less than another. That if you're gay, or if you're Muslim, or if you're Christian, or if you're from this country and not this country, therefore you're of less value. And the culmination of that equation is you have the right to be killed. And I think the minor forms of that equation enrage me, because I can't really I can't act against the major forms. I cannot pay my taxes, and therefore, you know, I will lose money from the IRS if I don't believe in what the U.S. government is doing, and then I'll be taken to jail, and I'll have to call you to get me out of jail. But you know, if you're reading the news and you're upset, say, about what FARC is doing in Colombia, there's very little you can do besides perhaps donate money or volunteer at a center for immigrants from Colombia with trauma to help them get jobs or something. It's very difficult, but the minor forms I find in my day-to-day life can be acted upon. One of them is the idea that somehow literature written in English is superior in quality or style to literature in translation. And there's some minor vocabulary words. You know, if someone speaks about international literature, they're usually speaking about anything not written in English. Or it's sort of like the world music section in record stores was always anything not in English. And some of it had, you know, 2,000 or 3,000-year-old histories. And so for me, the way to get at the big violence of that equation is to just simply treat writers from around the world as equal. And it does require a little bit more work, because I have to get your poem translated, have it looked at by someone who also reads Bosnian. But part of the beauty and the gift of this festival is that you enable me to do that. And so, you know, the first time I published Bosnian was Semezden Medinovic when I was at Granta. He had a heart attack, and he wrote a beautiful and scary piece about that. And I would not have been able to read that without having Sasha Hemen around to both translate it and to tell me about it. But doing that is a minor way of saying a heart which is from Sarajevo is worth just as much as a heart from America.
I think I could do it without micro, maybe. Actually, I would have two short questions. The first one ties into what both of you were talking
Sorry,
about so
the
far.
translation doesn't work, so you have to put the translation.
Okay. So it just ties into what both of you were talking about so far. The first very short question in terms of you saying that one of your goals sort of was bringing together many different literary voices together, even from outside the United States, or primarily. Is it comparable in any way to, say, a project, if we can call it a project, like Before Columbus Foundation, what Ishmael Reed is doing? Is it comparable in any way? And the second would be about the literary hub, because I was really pleasantly surprised. It just goes out to show how misinformed I am. Actually, that besides many other amazing things that you are doing, you are also connected in a very vital way with the literary hub. So I'm just interested how the literary hub is maintained. I hate to use the word sponsor and sponsorship because it has terribly negative connotations here in this politically corrupt culture in which we live in this country. Because whenever you say sponsor, then you have a political party looming large somewhere. So that's it.
The two, I'll answer the first one. Literary Hub is a website that it has essays, interviews, short stories, poems, everything on it about literary culture, and it's free and it's up there every day, and you can just log on and read it. And the idea was Morgan Entrekin publishes Grove, it's a U.S. publisher, published Samuel Beckett and Henry Miller and Ken Oe. He felt like there were too many sites on the internet doing the same thing. So one magazine would have its whole internet site duplicating what it did in print, and then another magazine would be doing something similar, and he thought, why not get the best of all the literary internet in one place? And so every day on Literary Hub, we run pieces from the best magazines around the world in English, and starting to get some of them translated. So we've partnered with a Dutch newspaper called Trouw. There's a newspaper in Norway that's giving us material, and it just keeps expanding. And it has 2 million readers a month. So it's basically it's barely 2 years old. So with almost 25 million readers a year, the ad revenue can support and fund the magazine, the website itself. And that's been a surprise because it's now the most read literary site in the world in English, and perhaps any language. And the other question is, I'm not sure how to compare it to the Columbus Foundation, but I just know I can hopefully create my corner of felicities, if you will. And there are other literary magazines, one called Public Space. They did a whole issue on Icelandic literature. I mean, they're more hardcore than me. McSweeney's did their Latin American crime issue. I'm not alone in this, but I do feel like if more people do the same thing, it's not like we all lose sales. All boats will rise together. And I do feel, among many things, the United States it has been not very good at some things, but it has taken in a lot of writers from around the world and they've made it their home. Not just Alexander Hemon, but Ion Lee and Wole Schwenke for a time, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Nurdin Bara teaches there. The politics and policy of the government are different from, to some degree, the politics and policy of people's generosity as a country. And there's networks of asylum spaces, basically, right now for writers. And so when I say that I'm publishing literature and translation, literature and translation actually comes to me, it comes to the country. And I hope that the United States remains the kind of place where that can still be true. Because I think, and that it can work other ways in opposite directions.
Are there any chance that they will remain that space of refuge for writers from all over the world, for the people who seek refuge?
It is not a good time to be optimistic, let's say, about that question, but I do remain optimistic because it's the hardest to be optimistic when it's the hardest. As in, it's easy to be cynical when things are hard. That doesn't mean that you can be stupidly optimistic, but I think the question of how to keep being that place forces you to figure out how to do the things that can keep it so. So if the government is enacting policies that make it hard for, one of my writers was affected by the travel ban, the Muslim ban, and couldn't come to a Freeman's event. So I wrote a letter to the State Department. So I went to the protests. If I believed it was a foregone conclusion, I wouldn't do those things. So, you know, my hope is that it doesn't go the way that it seems like it will sometimes, and that hopefully the enlarged ethic of the United States can become more of its public face again.
Just to end the thought, thank God for Canada. But I have a question regarding precisely this issue of translatability and the political dimension of somebody's work. In the sense that, when you say all writers are equal and you treat all poets as equal in some way, so that's a very generous way of looking at international poetry scene. But how do you translate the different contexts? Their contexts are different. So we had writers, who in their home countries are in prison because of what they write. We have, the dictatorships, various kinds of writers sitting in prison. And how does one communicate that political circumstance in a multicultural society like the U.S.? We have in Canada a similar situation where people say, I don't want to be representative of my country's poetry because I don't speak for them. I speak for myself against it. Against the culture, political culture. So, I think it's a dilemma for the writers many times, but also for how do you find a way to negotiate that kind of the reception of poetry in different ways when you include poetry in translation?
Well, there's two questions there intimately related. One is context translatable, and if the context is not there, is the poem still the same poem? And my answer to that is anytime a poem is translated, it becomes a different poem. So there's a poem in here by the poet Adisa, the Syrian poet who's lived for many years in Paris. And it's a poem about his body and his voice being his ultimate home. Because in some ways he was in exile, and he's not in exile, he's chosen to stay, and now he probably couldn't go back to Syria. But the most important thing is that the poem still has the power to create the spell that he wanted it to, and that it can still move you to the sounds of its words. And it's translated by Khaled Mutawa, who's a beautiful translator from Arabic. And I worry less about the context than about the shape and sound and form of the poem. Because usually the context may have pressurized the poem, but it's not the point of the poem, if that makes any sense. And as for literature and translation, making sure it's not representative, that's difficult, but I think it's hopefully just in the way that you talk about, as an editor, the work that you're publishing. So the next issue of Freeman is called The Future of New Writing, and I've looked, it features 25 writers from around the world, a few of them from the United States, all different genres, just emerging. So the oldest writer is a 70-year-old Texan, and the youngest writer is a 25-year-old French writer. And in the biographies, geographic information comes last. And I think it's not presenting a flat world, but it's trying to present a slice of world writing, writing around the world that hopefully is equally good. And I think that's the most important thing, is not just being omnivorous, but finding the best. Because that's the only thing that ultimately matters, is not whether you have a geographic spread of writing, but rather if it is all equally good and compelling. And so I don't put people in because I think, oh, I haven't had someone from China in a while. You know, I want them in because they have a very compelling story.
Imamo još pitanja? Dobro, ništa. Ja ću onda da privodim naše veče kraju i da svoja pitanja koja su još preostala sačuvam za druženje poslije, što i vam također preporučujem. Ako ste imali nešto, a iz bilo kojeg razloga oklijevali da pitate u okviru ovog zvaničnog dijela, John će biti tu još neko vrijeme. Hvala vam na strpljenju i hvala Johnu što je podijelio s nama svoja ovako zanimljiva iskustva koja se na različite načine tiču i književnosti, i prevoditeljstva, i izdavaštva, i svega ovoga što nas okuplja i što nas svi ovdje zanima.